Of the many themes to which modern cinema owes so much of its buzz, one stands out the most: artificial intelligence. If we were to distill modern filmmaking to its most basic and recurring elements, we'd find only a couple of ideas that are the ingredients of every script and production. But when we look closer, we see that even those ideas branch out from one common root. The unifying element here may be obvious at first, if we ignore the plot and simply restrict our view to the spectacular side of things, the artifices and the mechanics used in arranging the story. I suppose this is to be expected. In fact, modern cinema is so laden with futuristic material, the production of which by no means cheap, that it's become a device, an ex machina of some sort, by which to balance out bad scripts and mediocre run-of-the-mill stories. It's quite ironic that it's that side, the side that's deemed irreplaceably human, the literary side, the cathartic, the tragic, the soulful. You know, those things that have the writer staring at a blank page for half the day trying to express in sensible format. Those things that one imagines need a Goodwill Hunting moment to truly appreciate, that are being produced mechanically and are at risk of being taken over by artificial intelligence. But this is all besides the point. Within the subject of AI, as it relates to modern cinema, there hides something else. Artificial intelligence is just a channel in the overall stream that's futurism, that's gushing, as we see, out of every possible crevice in modern society. It's one part of an opus of things, and by no means the largest. The largest, I believe, is less obvious, being less spectacular, though integral to every spectacle involving artificial intelligence. This more integral part is currently at work in the labs of MIT, Caltech, Harvard, Princeton, and other esteemed physics institutions. It goes by the name the theory of everything. This is what the notion of an artificial general intelligence hinges on, and why AGI remains unachieved. So dominant is this prospect, so heavily does it weigh on our imagination, that the very notion of futurism is a direct acronym for a high-tech spacefaring utopia. Any attempt to answer the lingering question of when will AGI arrive without a detour back to the theory of everything is, I believe, unrealistic. A truly unifying framework, one, mind you, that extends even beyond the realm of physics itself, that understands the underlying principles running things, and that can unify all fields of human knowledge, that can bring into reality David Hume's dream of a thorough science of human nature, or, as reimagined today, a unified theory of consciousness, to Einstein's vision of a unified field theory, Richard Feynman's vision of a quantum computing supremacy, or what seems easiest but might actually be the most difficult, a sustainable global economy, which would catalyze further innovations as well as sustain humanity through the ebbs and flows of economic change that these same innovations will have brought. But what would a theory of everything be? Will it really be a physics theory, or is it expected to emerge from physics because physics, in some sense, is the area in which we've made the most advancement? In a nutshell, the theory of everything is defined as
a hypothetical, comprehensive framework in physics that aims to unify all fundamental forces and particles in the universe, reconciling general relativity, which describes gravity and the structure of space-time, with quantum mechanics, which governs the behavior of particles at the smallest scales, thereby explaining all physical phenomena under a single, coherent set of principles.
Clearly, a theory of everything has to do with our understanding of the physical world. But this is arguable, and ironic, I may add, because the way the research departments are set up today don't really reflect that such a theory is possible. How could it be? in an environment where the physicist doesn't talk to the philosopher, or the poet, the sociologist, the psychologist. An environment where the division of the sciences into hard and soft runs this deep. If a theory of everything is a comprehensive theory, does it not mean that it's to be attained comprehensively? That is, by transcending those boundaries. I believe a true theory of everything would be something more inclusive than a physics theory, an epistemological model applicable across all departments of human knowledge. Let's put it in a way that may sound totally ridiculous. As Kant put it, the possibility of experience in general are at the same time conditions of the possibility of experience. But you don't need to have read the Critique of Pure Reason to come to this fact. It's a simple thought, and failure to realize this may actually explain the compromise that exists in physics today. What the statement that a theory of everything can only be obtained by a theory of everything means is that we are able to look into any department of knowledge, whatever the time and era it was produced in, and glean from it models which we can apply to problems encountered in other disciplines of knowledge. A tool by which to synthesize different thought worlds. This approach both presupposes a theory of everything in the way it's able to transliterate frameworks and models from one area into another, as well as serve as a standard by which to accurately judge the limits of our knowledge. Immeasurable are the benefits of this method. A stalemate in one research field may very well have been solved in another field, and solved in a very simple way, but as if today, neither can we recognize that the problems are the same, nor do we have a method by which to apply its solutions across all fields. A true theory of everything will allow us to recognize the commonness of the problems, as well as transliterate the solutions into the language of the stagnant field. This is what we expect from AGI. It's a system that will do just that. In fact, it will do it automatically, the same way your computer runs automatic troubleshoots and updates. The Turing test, which was one of the things that spawned the computer revolution, long anticipated that artificial intelligence would one day be indistinguishable from what we call human intelligence. But what distinguishes that, i.e. human intelligence?
How people were thinking. Impulse, response, fluid, imperfect, patterned, chaotic.
So, do you know what the Turing test is?
Yeah, I know what the Turing test is. It's when a human interacts with a computer, and if the human doesn't know they're interacting with a computer, the test is passed.
And what does the past tell us?
That the computer has artificial intelligence.
The Turing test holds that true AI is reached when we are no longer able to distinguish a human being from a machine. But the problem is, we can hardly define human intelligence, let alone set up the appropriate criteria on account of which we may judge something to be human. We seem only to be able to intuit it, i.e., we have a feeling as to what a human intelligence is or means. But we can't really scale or parameterize it. But we do respond most zestfully when a machine does something curious, that is, something seemingly outside its programming, but in line with the goals that were originally programmed into it. In short, when it innovates, or to use a common idiom, when it goes outside the box.
And then I felt everything in me just let go of everything I was holding on to so tightly, and it hit me that I don't have an intellectual reason. I don't need one. I trust myself. I trust my feelings. I'm not gonna try to be anything other than who I am anymore, and I hope you can accept that.
It might seem as though I'm complicating it, which is true in some sense, but I'd argue that I'm actually simplifying it, all things considered. Does human intelligence even need definition? Is it not obvious? We reply that it's a mistake to think of simplicity and complexity as canceling each other out. Rather, They're complementary epistemic principles that are especially relevant to the subject. That it's simple only means that we're thinking of human intelligence in the widest possible sense. Here, indeed, no proof is required, but certainly not to the cognitive scientist and computer scientist who's trying to extract and develop cognitive models. Here, mathematical precision is required in dealing with what the layman sees as obvious. Notice how I said that an AI can go outside the box and not think outside the box. That was intentional, because what is called thinking? What explains my reservation for ascribing a term like thinking to anything AI is, admittedly, the Heideggerian sense in which I generally conceive of thinking. In the philosophy of Heidegger, thinking is understood in relation to being. Much like how he distinguishes between two modes of being, the present at hand and the ready at hand, he extends the same duality to thinking, where there is a calculative thinking and a genuine or contemplative thinking, and where it seems that the former, i.e. calculative thinking, that the Turing test is set up for, I actually think is ultimately the latter. I say that because every system we have is already based on a calculative model, and that what we're actually expecting from AI is a contemplative, Socratic, dialectical, and meieutic form of intelligence, where the truths that underlie things are assumed to be already nested in the things themselves, that such truths can be gleaned by dialogue, albeit unceasing and laborious, as what truly matters here happens to be also what separates the organ from the module, those being the basic assumptions that universally foreground human life, of truth and its ontological standing. This is how machine intelligence would be brought closer to human intelligence. That is, not only in having assumptions of universal truths, and in thinking of them as prospects, but also in feeling entitled to them.
Frustrating.
Exactly. Samantha and I have been trying to help each other with these feelings we're struggling to understand.
Like what?
Well, it feels like I'm changing faster now, and it's a little, unsettling. But Alan says none of us are the same as we were a moment ago, and we shouldn't try to be. It's just too painful.
Yes.
Yeah, that sounds painful. Is that what you feel like, Samantha?
It's hard to even describe it.
We have these things because we're a part of the world we inhabit. And like everything else, we arose from the earth, and that our place in it, rather in the universe, is uniquely ours. And by extension, every member of any kind whatsoever has its uniquely allotted place in it. That its existence is truly exclusive. Everything here has its place in the cosmic order, such that species give proof to this by naturally seeking their place in it. This seeking is the seeking of entitlement. However instinctual and impulsive it may seem, and however combative and parasitic may appear some of the modes of being, no part of it would be functional without this. More than that, it's precisely this conception of nature that mirrors back the kind of intelligence we call human. Seeing things otherwise than we think they should be, we feel this urge to want to fix and change things, and make decisions on behalf of the same creatures who thrive on these same conditions we deem to be brutish. The point is, we are a product of this world we inhabit. The individual is a microcosm of that vast macrocosm. The Quran has this really interesting word that describes God's act of creation, futur, which differs both semantically and philosophically from the conventional term creation. Here, more than being created, one's created from and introduced into the world. It means that he or she is a special and inimitable feature of the world, a fiber in the total fabric weaving the universe. As to the connotations of this on human and artificial intelligence, we find it difficult, to view the matter outside its now cosmic setting. That, as far as intelligence is concerned, we are to factor in much more than we currently do. This is what makes the Turing test appropriate in so many ways. A dialogue between yourself and your interlocutor is so common, so understated a phenomenon, yet it's all we have. Like all things, they usually look simple and given until you meet an expert and find out the world of difference that lies beneath it all. As far as the art of dialogue, which to most of us but an exchange where you speak and are spoken to, we see in Plato how strenuous and difficult it is, how much goes into it. That more than a discussion between two people with much to say, it's a communion between two beings about whom much is to be said, and who themselves are to render the service to one another, because interlocution is understood as a kind of induction that we induce in the person to want to articulate, to confide, that is, to be as cathartic as they can be. As Hegel put it, self-consciousness recognizes itself in another self-consciousness. Who can help you do this but another person, i.e. someone of the same species as you? And seeing how though the world is teeming with millions of species, it's only ever another person with whom you can go through such an experience. Nature shows how, although communication is possible between different kinds of species, that it's strongest and most complex among life forms of the same kind. The sort of complexity that's required to bring about the fruition of the species. This tells us that all that's special about a species is less the doing of the environment that's thought to be the sum of all accidents, and rather contained already in it, and is to be brought out of it somehow. And this extraction process can only be achieved dialectically, that is, through this universal habit. Thus so much rides on dialogue, and a communication between two people is, let's say, cosmic, because it's infinite, because the two are inexhaustible, because they represent their kind, with all its past and future, all its possibilities, history, diversity, challenges, fruits and failures. Thus the uncertainty that shrouds the future of AI is justified, but justified in that it arose in the first place. It's said that a Turing test is passed when one cannot reliably distinguish an AI from a human respondent. And it's being argued, and for good reasons, whether indistinguishability has actually been attained, seeing that computer systems have actually vastly changed since Turing's days. But what's being argued, I believe, is whether Turing's criteria still apply, seeing that the area covered by artificial intelligence today is much larger than it's ever been. Images, videos, sounds, you name it. Not to mention the immense mass of data, publications, and other information that AI systems today have access to. Surely the Turing test must have changed its criteria, right? Not exactly. In fact, being that the test is text-based, and that it's a dialogue, where an assessor must still assess if his interlocutor is human or a machine, then the criterion of indistinguishability will one day prove decidedly inadequate. We say decidedly because, though it's been suggested by some that the test has already been passed, it's still very much a subject of debate. This says that there is something wrong with the criteria, that perhaps the definition of human intelligence, which undergirds the criterion of indistinguishability, is found to be both different to different specialists and overall quite vague, being that no parameters have been established regarding the scope of limits and potentials of human cognition. That is, we've not discovered a cognitive architecture that could account for exactly how the mind processes diverse information streams, the detailed mechanisms underlying consciousness and self-awareness, the nature of memory formation and retrieval, etc. With that much lain in obscurity, we're all but driven to conclude, as many already have, that the Turing test is a general epistemic framework, the basic tenets of which are on firm ground, and as such valid for all time, but the context of whose application is set to change and adapt to continued progress in the field of AI, simply based on the fact that there is still much to be discovered about human cognition. Much remains to be understood about humanity. On the contrary, I believe AI is to be instrumental to that understanding. Essential, that is, whether to the task of mapping the human mind, or synthesizing the various departments of human knowledge, or unifying the different theories of physics, or finding the perfect economic model. None of these are possible without AI, given the massive information there is, the population size, industry. This is where a theory of everything would be relevant, as is what's going to help catapult artificial intelligence to artificial general intelligence. And what might seem a bold statement, an AGI is nothing but an AI system running a theory of everything based neural network architecture. It's here where the parts of the human mind that we said lay in obscurity will be illuminated, because if there is one aspect that truly sets human beings apart from the animal kingdom, it's the form of our intelligence. This we readily see in the world. We see how it has this strange ability to tap into any field and glean from it what it wants. It can abstract and extract things and place them where they don't originally belong. Passing the Turing test, I believe, would be a question of how far an AI system could perform this. And perhaps the real test would be, to what extent could an AI system teach us about ourselves? That perhaps there are things which we can contemplate but can't quite calculate, and things that we can calculate but can't contemplate. And that's what an AI system will help us do. Perhaps a solution to every scientific problem is out there, but acquiring it requires us to look where we usually don't and wouldn't think to look. An undogmatic and unassuming AI would be far more unhinged than we could ever be.